Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a dynamic that affects literally every single interaction we have, and that is the fascinating science behind getting a yes. Whether you're trying to negotiate a massive business deal or, honestly, just trying to figure out where to eat dinner with your friends, understanding the psychology of persuasion is an absolute superpower. Let's just be real for a second and ask, what does it actually take to get that yes? Think about the last time you tried to convince a family member to see your point of view or a friend to join you on a weekend trip. Did you just cross your fingers, make your case, and hope for the best? A lot of times we treat persuasion like it's some sort of mysterious magic or just natural charisma that you're either born with or you aren't. But it's really not. As we're going to see today, getting a yes is a deeply structured, scientifically backed process. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, the science of persuasion. Second, roadblocks to a yes. Third, the techniques of influence. And finally, number 4, persuasion versus manipulation. All right, kicking things off with part 1, the science of persuasion and how this process actually works. Getting a yes isn't just one giant leap. It is a 4-step journey that every successful message has to travel. First up is attention. I mean, you can't persuade someone who isn't even listening, right? Your message has to be interesting, distinct, and spark genuine curiosity right out of the gate. Second is comprehension. Once you have their attention, they have to actually understand you. This means designing your message around their frame of reference, not just your own. Third is retention. They need to remember what you said. We pull this off through repetition and really highlighting the most important points so the idea sticks. And finally, acceptance and action. Because persuasion isn't just about them nodding along politely. It's about them taking action exactly as you intended. So here is the absolute clincher. Persuasion is entirely receiver-centric. Honestly, it doesn't really matter what you say. It only matters what the receiver understands. Think of it kind of like a giant Venn diagram. Successful persuasion happens when there is a minimum discrepancy between the meaning you intend and the meaning they actually perceive. For that to happen, your field of experience and their field of experience absolutely must overlap. You have to meet them exactly where they are. Now that we know the path, what are the roadblocks that operate between the persuader and the persuaded? Let's move into part 2, roadblocks to a yes. The first roadblock we hit is the semantic barrier. Semantics is just the science of meaning. These barriers pop up when words have multiple meanings. Think of that famous historical misdirection, Ashwatthama Maragaya, where the deliberate ambiguity of a single phrase completely changed the course of a battle. These barriers also happen when we use confusing technical jargon or when our body language just doesn't match the words coming out of our mouth. To overcome this, you've got to use receiver-friendly symbols, focus your communication on clear ideas rather than just trying to sound clever, and use relevant examples to really lock down your point. Next on the list are psychological barriers. These happen when there's an incompatibility in attitudes and values, wide emotional differences, or a huge power distance between you and the person you're talking to. And let me tell you, these are significantly harder to remove than semantic barriers. Why? Because they stem from much deeper personality inadequacies or deeply ingrained beliefs. You can't just change up your vocabulary to fix them. And that brings us to the ultimate psychological barrier, the trust deficit. Look, if there is no trust, there's absolutely no persuasion. Zero. Fixing a trust deficit isn't some quick psychological hack you can pull off in 5 minutes. It requires creating a genuine climate of trust over time. You have to offer non-judgmental acceptance, display true empathetic understanding, and show unconditional positive regard toward them. People literally need to feel completely safe before they'll ever let themselves be persuaded. The final roadblock is the physical barrier. These are literal environmental disturbances that just get in the way. We have all been there, right? An incredibly loud construction site outside your window, a terrible lagging internet connection on a Zoom call, or just sitting in an uncomfortably hot room. Fortunately, these are the absolute easiest to handle. You usually just need to tweak the physical environment or simply move the conversation to a better spot. All right, part 3. Now that we understand the foundational barriers, let's hand over the actual tools of influence. Tool number 1 is reciprocity. This is built on the universal principle of give and take. From a very young age, we're all taught that we should find some way to repay others for what they do for us. It's deeply hardwired into us. When you look at local community services or even large-scale government savings programs like the Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana, they are textbook examples of behavioral psychology. They tap into this profound human desire to give back when something valuable is provided first. Bottom line, if you want a yes, start by giving something first. Building right off of that, we have commitment and consistency. Once people make a choice or take a stand on something, they face this intense internal and external pressure to behave consistently with that commitment. Think about a formal pledge-taking ceremony or those deeply ingrained cultural commitments made to parents or romantic partners. By securing a very small initial commitment from someone, you dramatically increase the chances that they'll follow through later, simply because they want to remain consistent in their own eyes and the eyes of their peers. Next up are two huge ones, social proof and liking. Social proof is basically our tendency to decide what's correct just by noticing what everyone else is doing. We naturally assume if the crowd is doing it, it must be right, whether that's adopting global genes culture or participating in long-standing arranged marriage traditions. And then there's liking. It's elegantly simple. We say yes to people we like or admire. This is exactly why devoted fans will copy a celebrity's style down to the last detail, sporting a KGF Rocky beard or wearing a Salman Khan-style bracelet. We say yes to those we want to emulate. Then we've got authority and scarcity. Most of us are raised to respect authority, and we often defer to it pretty quickly. Observing how religious gurus hold significant sway in various cultures simply showcases authority dynamics in action. Sometimes we even confuse the mere symbols of authority with the real thing. And scarcity, oh man, nearly everyone is vulnerable to this one. Opportunities just seem way more valuable when they are less available. Think of how you might convince a friend to pull the trigger on a specific bike or car just by pointing out it's the very last model on the lot. Scarcity drives incredible urgency. On top of all that, successful persuaders have a whole rapid-fire arsenal of other techniques to systematically build their case. They use highly logical arguments. They use incentivization to reward a yes and disincentivization to actively penalize a no. They use consistent reminders to keep their core message top of mind. They heavily employ the Tina factor, convincing you that there is no alternative. And finally, sometimes they bypass logic entirely, appealing directly to your deepest psyche and emotional state just to seal the deal. Okay, let's shift gears for our final section today, Part 4, Persuasion versus Manipulation, and drawing that critical ethical boundary. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast we are talking about. Notice that clear dividing line. It is incredibly important that we recognize the boundary between ethical influence and unfair control, because the reality is the exact same psychological techniques we just talked about can easily be used for either. When you really break it down to its core, persuasion is rooted in noble intention. It's the act of causing people to do or believe something that brings about a genuinely positive outcome for them. It empowers the person, and crucially, it builds long-term trust. Manipulation, on the other hand, is driven by a selfish or even immoral intention. It's about playing upon someone by artful or unfair means strictly for your own advantage. The person manipulated ends up victimized, poorly treated, and it utterly destroys whatever trust existed between you in the first place. Which leaves us with one deeply important question to reflect on as we wrap up this explainer. When you communicate, are you building trust or are you just taking control? The science of persuasion absolutely gives you the tools to get a yes, but at the end of the day, it's your character that determines how you use them.